which I think we should talk about, because a lot of people say, oh, Andrew, you know, you're just talking crap because there were explosions. You know, we've got all these witnesses reported them. You can hear them on the videos. Actually, that second part is not really true, because if you listen carefully to the videos, say, of World Trade Center building number 7 going down, you can hear people's conversations over the, you know, whilst the building is actually, you know, going in a downward direction. You can hear people's conversations. Now, if this thing had been blown up, you would have heard this bang, 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 like that, and you cannot hear this. And you can hear a sort of rumbling sound as the World Trade Center 1 and 2 are destroyed, but it's in no way is it in proportion to the actual size of the building.
There's a famous video of a guy on a phone, and he hears a bang, and and you can see him crouch down like there is an explosion. So there are explosions, but Dr. Judy Wood says everything, you know, bombs go bang, but everything that goes bang isn't a bomb. So
exactly,
it could have been something else happening that wasn't.
Well,
a bomb.
I know that video that you mean. I think it's a firefighter, isn't it? And he's, as you say, he's on a street phone, you know, a pay phone in the street. Yeah. And as you say, it's actually very loud explosions. It sounds like almost like very loud gunshots rather than bombs going off, I think. But you could argue that it was bombs. Now, when I first heard that video, I thought the explosion sounded a bit odd. But let's take it that is a real, you know, video of real explosions. I think it may have been made up, that video, actually, to be totally honest with you. But because you only hear it in that one video, you don't hear it in any others. But let's take it that yes, it was a real video. It is valid that it was recorded explosions. We have to explain what the explosions were. And as you just said, you know, just because we've got an explosive sound doesn't mean it was a planted explosive. It could have been, you know, for example, we use the analogy of putting an egg in a microwave oven. You know, switch on the microwave oven, leave it for a minute or two. What are you going to get? You're going to get a boom. Is that egg a bomb? No, it's not. But what happened is the microwave energy has been transmitted into the egg to heat it up, and the egg explodes because of the heat inside of it. And
the firefighters had oxygen tanks on.
They did. And if you read the accounts, as we have done, you can download, if you want, from my website or the New York Times website, you can download 500 first responder witness accounts, which were taken between, I think, October 2001 and something like, I don't know, March 2002 or something, I can't remember. But if you can see the dates on them all. And you'll find, as you say, firemen reporting explosions going off, both in the towers and, curiously, even a bit harder to explain, they have these things called Scott packs, which are actually oxygen tanks that they use. Obviously, they don't want to get overcome by smoke, so they have oxygen tanks, as people probably know. These are on the backs of the fire trucks, and they were spontaneously exploding. Would that be thermite, do you think, anybody? Thermite that they put on the fire trucks? You know, or was it
Bin Laden and his planes did that?
Yeah, or was it Bin Laden and the hijacked planes that made these oxygen tanks explode? You know? So this is what, going back to cherry-picking evidence, this is what people won't talk about. You know, if you ask Richard Gage about the exploding oxygen tanks and the testimony of those, he'll just say, oh yeah, that was just, you know, nothing, you know, that's what Judy Wood talks about. We don't talk about that because we don't think it's significant. He won't try and explain it, despite the repeated testimony of that, and one's going off in the towers. And what my understanding is that these explosive sounds were just like an oxygen tank. They came from pressurized tanks. So if anybody likes to think for a minute for themselves rather than me tell them, what other pressurized tanks might you find inside the World Trade Center buildings, for example? Can you think of any examples, Matthew?
I know the answer to this because I've watched so much of the Dr. Judy Wood's presentations that the answer is water tanks.
Right.
Because they had to pump water up because they couldn't pump water right to the top of the World Trade Center. Right. Too high. They had to go up in steps. And
That's
so
right.
there's like water reserves halfway up, and then further up there's more water reserves.
Yep. So you have pressurized tanks there with the weight of water, you know, above, pressing the water down below. So that's one example. But for example, in a building like the World Trade Center, which had 110 floors, let's say Let's just take an example that we've got 5 fire extinguishers per floor. So we're going to have 500 fire extinguishers or 550 fire extinguishers in the World Trade Center. None of those were found in the rubble. So that means they were all destroyed. What happened to them? Well, if you can imagine a scenario where something is affecting the metal of the building, we've already seen that steel turning to dust. If that process is going on throughout much or, well, in fact, all of the metal in the building, what's going to happen to fire extinguishers, folks?
Well, what turned the towers into dust? Well, very material specific, wasn't it? Because the paper is unburned. You get paper everywhere, but there's steel and other materials. No toilets, so whatever makes toilets, that's been dustified.
Correct. Yeah, so the paper, as you quite rightly observed, another very important observation. Most people have seen the pictures of the paper, blowing around as the towers are burning, and then later, it's all over the ground when the towers have gone. If you're saying that you've got this huge amount, whatever, 100 tons of thermite, which is what this Danish chemist claims, Niels Harrit, who is basically a liar, because if he's a chemist like he claims to be, he knows less chemistry than I do, or if he does know the actual chemistry, then he's lying about it, because we've already covered about the thermite chemistry, for example. He should know that, and Gates should know that as well, but they don't tell you that because they're liars.
And they won't talk about Judy Wood. I remember the interview we did on Reynolds Reveal where Henrik brought up Dr. Judy Wood, and it didn't go well.
It did not go well. No, I mean that's a whole other story that people can read about if they're familiar with Red Ice Radio. And I got hate mail following that, because of what
I followed that. I followed it.
Yeah. So this is what you're dealing with, folks. This is what you're dealing with. I've described this. Once you come to this understanding and knowledge, it's not a theory. It's understanding and knowledge we're talking about here, not theory. We're talking about understanding and knowledge, right? If you want that, it's available. If you want to go round and round in circles and debunk and say it wasn't that, I had somebody writing about this nuke thing, again, the Russian thing we mentioned yesterday, and then I explained to them it couldn't have been that. I sent them all the links, and covered some of the things we've already talked about just now. Sent them the links to... if you look at that rock that's in that picture, it all looks like as if it's melted. But if you look at rock pools, for example, that have had a lot of water erosion in them, that also looks like that rock in those pictures that are in the article. So I think that's just water erosion, because that area where the World Trade Center was built used to be in the Hudson River at one time, and they built this thing called the Bathtub, which we we haven't talked about, or maybe we mentioned it very briefly, didn't go into it. That was built around to reclaim some land from the Hudson River. And this bathtub was like this huge concrete, literally a bath tub, and the towers were inside of this. They were inside this bathtub. And the lower area of the World Trade Center towers was 70 feet below the Hudson River. That's where all these mall stores were. They were actually below the level of the Hudson River. And you had this huge, I don't know how many meters thick it was, maybe, 15, 20 feet thick or something. I don't know how thick it was. But if that had been breached or cracked in any way, that water would have come in and it would have flooded lower Manhattan. End of, So these supposed nukes that went off in the basement, micro nukes, mini micro nukes, super nukes, nano nukes, whatever nukes they come out with next week nukes, they didn't damage the bathtub. These were, if they're claiming it was explosives, then it was highly selective explosives. And yet they made no sound, they gave off no light, and they didn't damage the bathtub. They didn't create a seismic signature. So all of that is ruled out. So the bathtub, as I say, was built to reclaim land from the Hudson River. So this rock that we're talking about was probably originally on the banks of the Hudson River, so the sea was washing in, it was getting eroded, and that's what's created this, what looks like an apparently molten rock phenomenon, which of course people are immediately thinking was the heat from a nuclear device. It's just nonsense.
There's the Russian guy that wrote the book, I can't remember his name now. Karlazov, yeah. In his book he says that the towers was built with the nuclear Because it said they couldn't get planning permission to build a building unless they could work out how to take it down in the future. And so they had to be built with the nuclear detonation in place. So when they want to build them down, they could. So that's why he says that's it, the reason why. That's why they came down using nuclear explosions, because they already had them in place. And it's like the Sears building in Chicago also had the same nuclear device underneath it when it was built. And there's a news report on 9/11 saying that they're evacuating the Sears building, and he uses that as evidence to suggest that it was nuclear that brought it down. But yet, no broken bathtub.
Exactly, and this guy wrote to me because when he produced this 26-part video series, I think it's about 9 hours long or something, and I think it's been on and off the internet. Oh, please watch my video series. I didn't watch the whole thing. I watched about first hour.
I got to part 10.
Yeah, I think I maybe got to somewhere around there. And I realised that he was missing a lot out. The stuff we haven't even talked about yet, which is just completely off the radar screen of any stories of nukes or anything like that. When I asked him what about the bathtub and what this, because it doesn't matter, you mentioned there how he alleges that the World Trade Center was built with the nukes in it. That's kind of irrelevant whether it was put in it when it was built or put in later, because it still had to go off to destroy the buildings. So whenever it was put, it's still going to create a seismic signature. It's still going to create heat. It's still going to create light. None of those things are seen, and we don't have a high level of radiation either.
It was still going to break the bathtub as well.
It was still either broken it or affected it or damaged it in some way. But he didn't even know what the bathtub was, for heaven's sake. So that's why he didn't include the explanation in his. He didn't include it in his explanation. And then the guy, when I wrote to him, he wrote to another chap I know called Abraham Hafiz Rodriguez, and he wrote to Abe that he'd written to me, and then I changed my mind about the nukes, and I agreed with him, with Karlazov. That's what he wrote to Abe. So that's a bald-faced lie. That is just a lie. So why does this guy need to lie? If he's allegedly telling the truth, because I don't lie to tell the truth,
Let's move on. Let's talk about, everyone talks about building 1 and 2, and building 7 is the smoking gun, but there's other buildings that are equally, if not more interesting. Building 4 and building 3 and building 6.
Right. I mean, Dr. Wood would be better to talk about these, but I can cover them a little bit. And for example, building number 4, World Trade Center building number 4, I think that was the 8-story building. I tend to get 4 and 6 mixed up as to the exact height and everything.
6 is the one with the scoop out of it, and 4 is the.
That's right. Yeah, 4 got cut in half. Yeah, so basically, if you look at the pictures of building 4, half of it disappeared, and the other half was just badly damaged. But it's literally like somebody had cut through it, like you cut through a slice of cake. It's literally like that, So how do you explain that? It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. And as you said, building number 6. It's like the whole central section has gone. There's a big circular hole in the middle of it. I don't know, maybe 70, 80 feet in diameter. I forget the exact dimensions. And if you look down, you have aerial photos of this. I think it's probably on that page we've already linked. Let's see if I can find it while we're on the subject. You can see that there's virtually no debris in the middle of it. So the whole centre section of this building has gone, yet there is no debris in the middle of it. So where did this debris go? This building also appears to have largely been turned to dust as well. Well, the centre of it certainly, not so much the outside. So,
and it's more evidence that lack of explosives, because they didn't use explosives to bring the rest of it down. They had to pull it down by ropes because they were too scared to break the bathtub.
Exactly. So in other words, if they didn't want to use explosives to destroy the remains of what was there, just clean up the site and so on and shift it all away, then how can it possibly have been that they used explosives in a controlled demolition manner for the rest of it, for the main part of it, which is the horrible events which transpired,